All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here with Todd Ryan. And, you know, I'm glad to bring him on the show because really listen to his podcast, which is called Black Belt Banter, which you can find anywhere pretty much. And his podcast kind of inspired me to kind of jump in and start doing my own. So, Todd, I want to thank you for taking time to do this. And I kind of want to start with the podcast. I mean, what made you decide to start doing that?
Honestly, it was just kind of the guys around the gym's idea because I'm always ranting and whatnot. And they said, you should do a podcast. And then Clinton was what really made it happen. He was the one that knew all the audio gear and everything. And he was quite gung-ho. And so we just did a couple goofing off and it kind of just rolled into what it did. And we really enjoyed doing it. And we did a lot of it. He wanted to do like 2 or 3 a week there for a while. And then he got busy with school. We kind of fell off it a little bit, but we still do them sporadically when we can get the guys on and with whatnot. I mean, COVID kind of shut us down for a while and then we never really got back into it. But yeah, I feel honored that, like you say, we inspired you to do your podcast. That's awesome.
Yeah. And you have most of the people in person. Is that when you normally would do it?
Yeah. So he got a little digital recorder thing and we just kind of set up a spot in my office in the corner, and I'd have all the guys from around town or whoever I could get, come up and sit down and talk with us for a little bit, tell us their story.
Now, I kind of listened to an interview you did on your own show where Clinton kind of interviewed you, and I know you had wrestled at Broken Arrow. Why don't you talk to me about that? And I like to get into like the development of a particular athlete. So what did you feel wrestling at Broken Arrow? Obviously there's some cliche things, but maybe something people don't know about that helped you.
All the cliche things, like you said, but Broken Arrow, at the time I got to be on the team, like when I was a freshman or sophomore, I think it was the first year we won state, and the seniors and Coach Dunlap had really worked hard to get to that level, like the top of the state in 6A. So when you came from the junior high up to the high school, the work ethic was a lot like when you came from most high schools to college, I think. It was super hardcore. We were running every day, weights every day, as well as super long, late practices. And then some of us would even shower, stay, and have to teach the youth kids at night. So, and it was run like everything around wrestling. It just taught you kind of that same fighter life ethic, I guess. I don't know. A lot of guys, when they train for fights, life shuts down, and everything focuses around that. That's kind of what being on the wrestling team was like at Broken Arrow in those years. When it was wrestling season, school kind of even fell to the wayside to train hard and get things done for going to state. But yeah, it translates well to MMA, obviously.
So when you transitioned, and I know you transitioned with Mikey Burnett, what were your strengths from wrestling that you felt crossed over to jiu-jitsu fast?
Well, obviously, jiu-jitsu and wrestling are just different ends of the spectrum, but they're both grappling. I mean, jiu-jitsu is the more open-ended grappling. Collegiate wrestling is kind of a very set rule base that you know what the other guy's trying to accomplish, where he's going to come at you, and it's kind of who's the better athlete and who's trained their technique better. Jiu-jitsu has more options, but it doesn't say that wrestling doesn't transition into jiu-jitsu well, because it does. All the body movement and things like that are essentially the same balance, the same type of dealing with an opponent as well as gravity. You just kind of change the way you move. So I see it every day teaching. Wrestlers just pick it up quicker. They just have to adjust a few things. Whereas your average person who never did any type of grappling art or takedown art doesn't have the same balance and body mechanics. They haven't spent that time developing it. So wrestlers just tend to transition to it better, let alone then the work ethic too. I mean, they have that, they know what it's like to turn their bodies more into a machine and push through the pain to get better at it.
Are there some wrestling techniques that you think are more effective transitioning to jiu-jitsu than others? Maybe freestyle versus Greco or?
Yeah, I think in all styles of wrestling, there are certain techniques that switch over to jiu-jitsu better. Like certain takedowns for wrestling are going to, compromise your position for getting submitted. I mean, okay, for example, fireman's carry. Fireman's carry is a great takedown for a wrestler. And don't get me wrong, a great wrestler who can hit it explosively will still take down a great jiu-jitsu guy. But a lot of the times when you go to hit that fireman's carry, you're going to end up in a crucifix of some sort and locked in that way. And there's so many submissions from right there, it's not worth it. Whereas all the outside ankle picks and takedowns from a distance with wrestling, where you can take your opponent down and almost immediately transition to passing the guard as well, they transition really well, obviously. I mean, you almost have an advantage over the jiu-jitsu guy who's been learning ground game as well as takedowns at the same time. You come in with that knowledge already.
Now, I was kind of curious, like, you know, you're seeing a lot of these Dagestani athletes coming into mixed martial arts, and they're able to make their wrestling work against just about anybody, the ones that do it, guys like Khabib and Khamzat, who's Chechen. But,
right.
You know, I think the American wrestlers, a lot of them, you see them, they're getting takedowns, but they aren't able to keep people down. Why do you think the Dagestani athletes are more successful doing this?
I'm sure it just has something to do with, just like anywhere else, you go to different academies, they're training the same martial art, but there'll be different styles. I think it's just a different style of wrestling over there, more so than, you know, what's becoming dominant over here. Like one of my guys just sent me a video the other day of these young kids doing this like 90-second takedown scramble that looked more like a jiu-jitsu scramble than it did, you know, a freestyle wrestling scramble. So I think just the way they're developing over there is that hold you, control position, and maul you, just own it. Whereas over here, we're just doing more of a flowy style. And you can see jiu-jitsu and some other martial arts starting to influence wrestling as much as wrestling has influenced, you know, jiu-jitsu or MMA. Probably
so
not as much as MMA.
When you were wrestling, was it as flowy as what you're seeing now?
No, it wasn't. The scrambles that I'm seeing nowadays, I wasn't seeing where I was. I mean, we were more of a fundamentals team, you know what I mean? We had what coach felt worked, and we drill it to death, and everybody got good at it. There were a few guys who were more limber. I'm thinking of Josh Pulsifer, for example. Josh was a really limber and unorthodox guy when he wrestled and would get into some scrambles, but that was rare for our team. Whereas now I feel like I see it more and more, but that also might equate to the fact that with the internet and videos and everything, you can see what's going on more widespread than what matches I could watch when I was in high school, you know?
Now, when you transition with Mike Burnett, I know you started like in 2006. Let's talk about that. Like, what did you learn from Mikey aside from the wrestling you already had?
Jiu-jitsu and submission grappling, really. I got into it to get in shape, you know? I kind of missed the whole wrestling atmosphere. Just like everybody else, I was really timid about going in there. I didn't know what to expect. I thought I might have to fight for my life that first day. And it had much more of that wrestling room feel. It was what I grew up with, you know what I mean? And I kind of got a piece of that back. And as an older adult, realized that, oh man, that's what I missed. I missed the camaraderie, the getting the good workout and everything. So in the beginning, I was honestly just doing it to get back into some grappling, and I was having fun. And as I did it more and more and more and got in better shape, Mikey just encouraged me to transition into MMA and then start competing in jiu-jitsu and all that.
Yeah, I think people don't realize just how good Mikey Burnett is. And, you know, his skill level, he wasn't a guy that was just good for maybe this area, but really on par with a lot of the best guys in the world. Even in the grappling, I don't think people realize how skilled he was.
No, I think you're right, honestly. I mean, he was invited to Abu Dhabi back when you had to be invited, you know what I mean? And I can't remember who he beat, but he made it to the second round and ended up losing to Jean-Jacques Machado. And he was a great grappler. He's a monster, dude. Like, he's still a monster. So doing the old school Lions Den and him being the smallest guy, I think he learned to compete at a level that he would just take it wherever he needed it. And yeah, he was an amazing grappler. Still today, to this day, like, he is one of the greatest guys I ever grappled against.
And is his son still training with you?
Oh yeah, I see Freddie like every other day.
So now, how is he coming along as far as he's developing? Because I know he kind of competed a little bit, but I haven't seen him do like any fight to wins recently. Or
No, he was concentrating on school there, and right now he's just working. He's working like 3 jobs and just living life. He's still training, but he doesn't really have a desire to compete or do it. Don't get me wrong. His technical skill, and he's one of those guys that not only did he have all of the genetic gifts from his father, but he's been doing it his whole life. He grew up in the gym. So, yeah, when he comes in, it's an amazing thing to watch. But I don't think he has any aspirations for competing. He's concentrating on other things right now.
Now, when you were doing some training with Dale Paulo Cook, I mean, maybe the average person that's watching this probably saw him in the Choke documentary, but did you learn anything directly from him, or was it mostly Mikey that you were training with at that time?
It was mostly Mikey. Dale would come in and teach us in the MMA class sometimes, but it was pretty rare. It was mostly Mikey running it, but I'd grown up watching Dale's fights. My dad used to take me to Dale's fights. I mean, that was one of my first memories of fighting. And so, yeah, he's taught me a lot, and he's been great over the years, putting my fighters in his shows and everything else. So, yeah, the people who watch the Choke documentary probably want to villainize him or whatever else. And that the real, I feel like, legacy of Mr. Apollo is what he's done for fighting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean, that list of credentials there, and the fact to date he is still putting on the shows that are getting all our local side guys to the next level, and that's huge. I mean, that's giving back in a way that, you know, not many are doing and everyone needs. So he should be credited for that, if nothing else. And yeah, not to mention he's a badass.
Now, when you started teaching on your own, how many years later was that after you started training with Mikey?
Me and Mikey taught it together at OFC for years. And then when he left OFC, that was really when I started teaching on my own. That was when I started teaching adults more. I only taught a few friends before that. It was all the kids' classes for OFC. So when Mikey went off and started his gym, and I took over OFC, was the time I started teaching adults. I don't remember what year that was exactly. But I want to say it was like 2011, 2012, somewhere around there.
And how did that change you as far as someone who's training with people and competing a little bit? Now you're being a teacher. How'd that change your viewpoint and also maybe your technique approach?
I don't know if it changed my viewpoint any. I'm just a gym rat. So I was in the gym all day, every day before that, and then after that as well. But the teaching approach, it definitely made me learn as a coach, because teaching adults is different than teaching children. And anybody who teaches, your technique's going to get better. Like, that's just part of teaching. You redefine your own technique, and then through others' mistakes, you perhaps see details that you were taking for granted, which just makes your technique better and makes you a better coach. So over time, just like anything else, anything you do over time, you get better at it and better at it. And I developed the business side much later than I probably should have. But yeah, I just jumped right into it. And as far as competing, I love competing, and I'll compete anytime I'm healthy enough to compete, and I'll compete as long as I can, because I feel like that's good for you on a personal level, to get out there and push yourself, win or lose. And it just makes your jiu-jitsu better. Everybody will say it shows you what really truly works and what you need to throw out and what you're just playing with in the gym.
So when do you think it kind of became more of a business for you?
Honestly, when I quit drinking and my wife came into the picture, she kind of helped me to develop the business side. Whereas before, if I made enough money to pay the bills, I was happy. But she wanted to start treating it more like a business and, you know, turn it into a real gym and everything. So she kind of helped me along that path and pushed me. So that was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we moved out of a horrible location into a little garage unit and started going from there.
Now, I know you had talked a little bit about alcohol or whatever, but I was just wondering, like, you're training, you're doing something you enjoy. Why do you think you felt like it wasn't fulfilling enough, or maybe that you had an issue or anything like that?
That's a good question. No, I'm sure some of the alcoholism was, or that people like to blame it on hereditary or whatever else. And I'd always drank quite a bit, and was one of those guys that was like, oh, I train every day, I'm in great shape, it doesn't affect me, I'll be fine. But it was honestly when I left OFC and started Ryan BJJ and had to move down, and everything kind of downgraded. A lot of people left. Even though I was still training every day, it led to depression and things like that, and made me kind of internalize it and turn to alcohol. I mean, all the stereotypical things, and everything just went downhill from there. And downhill's a funny spiral. Like you start snowballing downhill. And before you know it, you're at rock bottom and you don't care. And you want an easy way out, really. You don't want to do the work it would take to climb back up out of that hole.
So how long did it take you to kind of climb back up and your business correlate to where that all works?
So it was probably, I quit drinking, and it was probably 6 months to maybe a year that me and my wife at the time, or we'd been dating at the time, and we kind of decided, you know, should I go get a real job, or do we want to try and make this gym thing work? And she pushed me more. I was actually leaning towards the real job. And she was like, no, you know what? You love this. You should try and do this. So let's do it for a year and see how you do it. And if you break even and you can pay your rent and everything for a year, you can keep going. And so the year came and went, and we were doing well. And then by a little after that year, we upgraded to the new facility and everything. And we've just never looked back after that.
How fast did it take you, like, when you say about breaking even or maybe gaining, how quickly does that happen? Or did it happen for you?
Oh, man. Honestly, Todd, I don't know. I feel like every day we get new people. So it started growing right away. And I don't know that it really stopped ever. There's lulls, obviously, but we haven't taken a step backwards. It's just always forwards. It's like, I love Cyborg's saying of, if you plant good seeds, you know you can only reap good things. Like, that's truly what it's been. Like, when I started treating it like a business and wanting the gym to grow, I put everything into my students. It was about teaching. It was about trying to grow guys and things like that. And it's just been nothing but flourishing. Now I have guys that have been with me, 4 or 5 years that are purple belts or blue belts, about to get their purple belts. And they're great team leaders. They're not, just guys that are great fighters and come in to bang every day. You know what I mean? Like, they come in, they're great coaches themselves, and that just snowballs. It's not just me growing the gym at that point. It's a great team growing the gym. So I feel like we've been really fortunate to, reap the benefits of having a great team.
But, you see guys struggle with gyms. Even Mikey struggled with that a little bit, over the years. Why do you think you have these lulls or maybe successes and failures in the gym business? Why do you think that is?
I honestly think it's just like anything else. Fighting and training can be an addiction. Just like anything else in your life done in excess can. A lot of guys, the training, they're just chasing the high from the training, and that's what they want every day. And so they're not really putting hustle into the things of the business they don't want to do. Like, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of that. So you have to make a regimen, just like a good diet, just like a good training program, any of that. If you're going to hustle for your business, you've got to put in that regimen all that stuff you don't want to do. And you have to try to succeed at that as much as being great at the training or being great at making great fighters. You know what I mean? So I feel like, honestly, that is the main point. It's almost like, I don't know, you have to just hustle harder in the areas you don't want to do, because just like anything else, if you just train what you're good at every day, you'll have a weak point. There'll be a hole in your game that can get exploited. So you train your weak points so that you're solid everywhere. You've got to treat your business just like that. Like, you got to work all the stuff you don't want to do. And a lot of guys don't realize you got to take risks too. A lot of people stay where they're comfortable, get set, and there's a good flow. You got to take risks. It's just like anything else in life. A good challenge that scares you is probably a good thing, because the only way to succeed is to fail until you do. Simple as that. Try things, suck at them, and get better.
Now, when you opened your gym, I know you do a lot of gi, which you probably weren't doing with Mikey necessarily. At least I know that wasn't something he did a lot. Because, I trained at Mikey's gym for, a period of time, but with Tom and Dave and Clay. But what made you kind of focus more in that area?
Oh, man, I always loved the gi. I was in love with the romance of, like, the old school Japanese uniform. And then once I started training in the gi, around that time was when all the great guys looked like NASCAR guys that had patches everywhere. And I used to spend hours sewing patches on my gi, any jiu-jitsu patch I could find, just to look like those guys. So I always loved the gi. I did. And even though we didn't train it much in the beginning, Once Mikey opened OFC, he regularly trained in the gi. I think there was a little while there he even trained more in the gi than I did. And he was always quite adamant about it's just more handles. Put on the gi. It's still jiu-jitsu. Like, we'll do it. And he never seemed to have a problem rolling in it. So, but yeah, I've always loved the gi. I prefer the gi. And I don't know if it's just the protection, the more options, the fact that you can slow the game down a little bit now that I'm getting older. But I would always prefer gi to no gi. And some of that's safety too, because especially with the no gi and the leg game being the way it is today, rolling with new guys and some of these younger guys that are just watching videos at home and perfecting the heel hook, with that not being an option in the gi, you're a little bit safer to just get out there and play with some of these younger guys.
Now, yeah, that's an interesting topic. Why do you think this is more so much the leg game? I mean, that's always been around.
Well, Danaher popularized it. I mean, the Danaher Death Squad, it's quite obvious. And I'm sure some of that just had to do with the age of the coverage media-wise and how widespread it could be of them winning with it. But, yeah, I remember learning a toe hold the first night I ever took a jiu-jitsu class in Mikey. So the leg game has always been around. He was actually pretty adamant about it. I won a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments as a white and blue belt with leg game because a lot of people didn't know what it was at the time. But, yeah, now everybody knows it. The system's been perfected. It's kind of leading to this anti-leg game where you don't want to get caught in those positions and you're transitioning to the back from those positions. But, yeah, I'm sure it's just like anything else, the Barambolo or anything that, has been kind of popularized in the limelight, and then access is everywhere to it. Anybody can go at home and grab their chair and start practicing invert drills. You know what I mean?
Right, but in this case, a lot of the best guys in the world are still having trouble figuring it out against them. Why?
They're great at it. I don't know. They're great at it. That's they seem to have that set system of, I know what I want. I know the positions I'm trying to get to, and I know exactly what you're going to do to try to stop me. So that gives them an interesting dynamic, because when it comes to grappling, there's a feel in it. And if one person gets a little bit more of that offensive feel and puts the other person on more of a defensive, it's a clear-cut advantage. Like, it's almost like the defensive guy is half a step behind chasing him. And I feel like that's what those guys have. They have such confidence in their system and the knowledge of what's going to happen that it keeps them half a step ahead. And they just work their way right to what they've done and drilled 1,000 times and get to it right there. And, yeah, as far as being better at it, it's like anything else, the 10,000 rule. They probably drilled it and done it more than anybody.
Well, could it be that they're doing a lot of stuff without the gi on, and a lot of guys they're competing against kind of spend maybe, I don't know, maybe more of their time in the gi, perhaps a lot of the Brazilian guys they're competing against?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, specifically like Gordon and probably Gary. I mean, when you're starting to chase the top names, yeah, you're getting to a lot of the guys that are, big credentials in the gi. But, no, they go against a lot of great no-gi guys, too, from a lot of, 10th Planet schools, or there's plenty of schools that are predominantly no-gi schools. So I feel like, yeah, you're right. Lately, probably their competition has been those type of guys. But I think it's just because he's running down the list, and, so is Gary. And a lot of these great gi guys, just because of, the more popularity of ADCC and the limelight and everything, are starting to kind of lean more to doing that more no-gi and competing at that higher no-gi level. And I'm not sure if it's more so than it's ever been. I just feel like it's getting better coverage than it ever has.
Well, someone like a black belt like yourself, if you're looking at it from the outside, what would guys need to do, or what do you think they might do to beat someone like Gordon?
I have no idea. I have no idea, man. He looks solid right now. He looks amazing. So, yeah, and I think it's going to be one of those things, styles make matches, that he's just going to have to come across somebody who is so good at their own style that, they can kind of get that upper hand on him right there. It's got to happen eventually. I mean, it's kind of admirable that he's out there taking all comers, because nobody wins forever. And so to keep putting yourself out there and not try and, cradle, you're undefeated or being the king or whatever, actually trying to get the biggest list of credentials. That's pretty cool. That is awesome. And he knows he's going to lose at some point. Everybody does. Everybody gets older. That's what gave him his rise in the jiu-jitsu. And I mean, for like he says, it might be his little brother for all we know. But yeah, there are some great young guys coming out there. All these amazing grappling shows on like UFC Fight Pass and Flow and all that. It's nice to get to see some of these really good purple belts and brown belts coming up, because you can just see that they're developing their style, and it's a different style. It's going to give guys fits. So yeah, the next new crop of young studs will come up. And Hunter Colvin, for example, I mean, Hunter is on fire right now. When they put him up to the main stage and let him compete against the great guy, what is he saying, like the main card guys and everything, he's going to do amazing, trust me.
Well, I mean, like I remember his match with Hulk in ADCC, you know, Hulk's kind of, at least from a physicality standpoint, is similar to Gordon in size, strength. And that seemed to be his most difficult match of the ADCC. So I even thought the Mateos match would be interesting, but I knew he was a lot smaller. So, but
yeah, when I saw the weight difference, I figured he'd maul him pretty much.
So maybe somebody like Hulk, who's big and strong like him, but can maybe get a little upper hand, because ADCC, the wrestling is so important now.
Right.
That might be there to exploit, but I don't know. You're right. It's an interesting thing to look at, because you have someone who no one can seem to get the upper hand on lately, at least.
Well, and if you watch his matches at ADCC, I can't remember which one, but there were a few where Gordon quite strategically won. You know what I mean? He stayed on the ground the right amount of times. He played into where he could get the points and couldn't get scored on. Like, he didn't just dominate with physicality and great technique. He was quite obviously intelligently playing a game plan to keep himself in that upper hand position. So when you put that into it with the physicality and the great technique, he's going to be tough to beat. I almost think it's going to have to be some really weird, lanky rubber guy that you just can't put in a bad position. It can threaten you from everywhere. That's just going to find a way to beat him. But even if that were the case, it would have to be like a submission-only format, because in a point format, that dominant position wrestler who can keep you from scoring on him positionally and just slowly inch his way to points on you wins that match.
Do you think we're going to see more? I mean, we just saw this match with Tony Ramos. We saw Gordon compete against, Bo Nickel, and who's the other guy from Jersey? I forgot that he went against Pat. Yeah. So do you think you're going to see more wrestlers entering submission grappling, or?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, besides the Olympics, there's still really nowhere to go for college wrestlers after wrestling, so now I don't see why they wouldn't transition into jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is kind of getting a semi-pro level, you know what I mean? You can make a tiny bit of money doing pro jiu-jitsu shows. So, and like we said, wrestling transitions so well to jiu-jitsu, I don't see why they wouldn't. As far as the switch of rule sets and, seeing jiu-jitsu guys wrestle and all that, yeah, that's entertaining. I mean, that's, like I said, it's all grappling. So to see great grapplers just kind of put a more, compact rule set on their grappling to showcase one set of skills in it or something, it's kind of fun. It shows how great they really are, and kind of shows if they have a hole in their game or not, But
as a coach, are you seeing like more wrestlers come to your gym, or with your connection to Broken Arrow, or is that just not something you really even try to exploit?
I guess I would have to say, yeah, I have more wrestlers now. Some of that might just be, so-and-so told his friend and they wrestle, and more wrestlers come in. Shay Conley, one of my pro fighters, he's actually a wrestling coach at Broken Arrow High School. So that may help some. I don't know if we have any wrestlers from BA. Most of the wrestlers we have are out of high school or out of college, in their mid-20s, whatever, wanting to transition to MMA.
Now, what is your experience like currently with your gym right now, as far as if someone were to come in, what would you say it's kind of like, your environment at your gym currently?
Oh, laid back. Laid back, yet very structured when it comes time to work. But yeah, we're not militant. There's not a lot of hierarchy. Like I said, I got a great group of high belts that help everybody. So right now we've got a great schedule too. We just kind of split things up and had to add more classes to kind of draw our numbers down in class. And yeah, it's going really well because the white belts can, get the open mats and train with black belts, brown belts, whoever they want. But the fundamentals white belt program is just white belts, and it's really helping them develop quickly. And we've had actually our most success ever in the last 2 tournaments in the white belt division.
Now, what made you structure your classes like that? Is that just something you decided to do, or was it something people advised you to do?
Numbers and space kind of dictated it. It was something we knew would eventually have to happen, and we wanted to happen because that kind of helps develop the high belts game too, to have advanced classes where it's just them and you can go over things that they're still confused about.
Now, when did you, because I know like Pete promoted you to black belt and stuff, like when that time came, everyone talks about getting promoted to black belt or whatever. What kind of things changed for you at that point?
I don't know that anything changed except, that was obviously amazing of Pete to do. Forever in debt to him and grateful for it. And I've talked about all that. But I think the only thing that really changed was the guys who had been with me and been loyal forever, they could finally get promoted. They could move up the ladder. It was one thing for me to be fine with, sitting in brown belt forever. But the guys who'd been with me forever, they needed to get their fair dues. And yeah, it was really nice to be able to give Russ and Steve their black belts last year.
Now, you said you're splitting up classes for numbers, so you're not really even struggling during this time. Like are a lot of gyms in town struggling at this point, or what do you know?
Right now, no, I don't feel like a lot of gyms are struggling. I feel like we've been really fortunate here as far as all that. Guys on the coast are closing their gyms and all that. We didn't have to do that. And, some of that's a credit to when we were all closed down. We've got great members. We've got great members. We've got great landlords. We've got great people around us. Like, it's just one of those things where, as a community, the 918, we've obviously always been good at taking care of each other for the last couple of years, but I feel like, yeah, everybody, as far as paying their gym memberships and all that, stayed true. And I don't know of any gyms here that closed. Do you?
No, I was just curious about that because I know a lot of them, like you're saying, on the coast. You read stories about different places, and you're saying, "Oh, we're split classes. We got too many people." So I was just kind of surprised to hear you say that. So it's been the opposite.
I say now it is. The recent time, yeah, we have seen a little bit of influx rise in numbers as a recent. But like I said, it's been kind of steady. COVID shut us down for a while, obviously, and slowed things way down. But it didn't hurt that, like I said, all the members paid their dues and stayed loyal and would keep in contact with us. And then as time passed, they slowly, started trickling back in. And it was just time with the way the year was going, school starting, and everything else to change the schedule.
Now, where do you see like jiu-jitsu in Tulsa maybe in a few years from now, or maybe 5 years from now?
I think it'll just continue to rise. I think jiu-jitsu is obviously rising everywhere. It's still growing as a sport. It's in its infancy as far as in development and popularity. It's only getting bigger with all the, the fact that UFC was the only sport going for a while. And I know their numbers went up quite a bit worldwide just because it was the only thing to watch. And that can't help but shed a little light on jiu-jitsu, quite obviously, as well as Muay Thai, boxing, all the other martial arts. But where Tulsa will be in 5 years, there's no telling. Because like I said, some of the young talent coming out of here right now is on the highest level of the world as far as jiu-jitsu, MMA, and all of that. So I think we're just going to see more of that. Iron sharpens iron, and when you're training with champions, you make more champions. Those guys are just going to inspire the younger guys to work harder. So in 5 years, I think we're just going to see better competition, deeper pools in the belts as far as jiu-jitsu, and just more guys up on that world stage, ADCC and, Mundials, all that.
But as a gym owner, do you see more people coming in wanting to fight, or because you don't see people in the gi in the UFC. So the people with their first introduction, they aren't seeing
No,
that. Are they
no,
coming in saying I
I'd say
want to fight, or they want to put on the gi right away?
no. I'd say the guys that come in to fight, like I said, most of the time they're wrestlers, or they're the young guys who kind of have it in their mind they want to fight. Most of them, and we don't get too many of those. The MMA team is pretty well set. I've been working with the same guys for a while mostly, but the jiu-jitsu people, it's mostly self-defense, or they've heard from somewhere the benefits health-wise and mentally and all that, so they want to come see what it's about. And most of those people do want the gi. Like, they like the uniform and the tying of the belt, all that.
I mean, I find that interesting. I lived in Japan for several years, and it always, like, I find it interesting. People say they're kind of interested in the uniform. A lot of people in Japan, at least from my experience, some guys didn't wear it at all. It just,
I've
it
heard
varied.
that.
Yeah. A lot of the guys, like maybe guys that were fighting in Shuto, and some of those guys, they really didn't train in the gi very much, honestly. But there were guys like Kei Shukai, which is Uno's gym, that trained in the gi quite a bit, and Yuki Nakai, and I know Ensign, some of his guys trained in the gi, some of them didn't. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily as common as maybe people would think.
Right. Another westernized thing. It's what we want it to be, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, it's Italian. Yeah. But no, as far as, like, if they're doing jiu-jitsu wherever they're at and they're going to compete Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they kind of have to train some in the gi. I mean, aside from its Japanese heritage or whatever else, now it's the choke your opponent out uniform. You know what I mean? Like, it's our own cut and weave and everything else. So even if it's not traditional to them over there, if they're competing in the highest level of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, they got to be trained in the gi.
Now, I heard, was it your father who's was pretty active in coaching soccer and things like that with the Roughnecks?
Yeah. He coached, managed, and played for the original Tulsa Roughnecks. And he's still the head coach for the Tulsa Athletic, the semi-pro soccer team out of Tulsa here.
Now, I mean, I find that interesting because I knew about Tulsa Roughnecks when I was a kid and stuff. And I had actually lived overseas when I was a kid. My dad was working in Saudi Arabia, so I watched a lot of, like, World Cup games and stuff when I was 6, 7, 8,
Right.
And how did he get into managing that team?
He played his whole life. He was on Hartwick, I forget what year, and I should know. I just read my uncle's book. And they won the national championship, and then from there he went on to play pro soccer around the country. And he ended up in Tulsa, and that's where he met Charlie Mitchell. They used to own the Charlie Mitchell's restaurants, and he started working for Charlie and playing, on the Roughnecks and everything. And then over the years, I mean, he did it. I remember it all growing up. I grew up in the Expo Pavilion, running around those back hallways and all that, in the locker rooms with those guys. So he was in every position of it at some place or other. When it changed to indoor soccer and it was the Tulsa Ambush, he was all part of that. I remember the goofy guy in the suit jumping around the stands with the greasy hair and all that. So he was always part of it. And then when Sonny D'Alessandro started the Tulsa Athletic Soccer Club, he just hired my dad as the coach.
But I mean, it was pretty big back then.
Right?
Oh yeah. It's kind of changed now.
From what I remember, yeah.
Why do you think? I mean, soccer's still really popular, but maybe in Tulsa it kind of wasn't as big now, maybe, as it was before.
Yeah, I don't know. And I've heard some people say that, but don't tell that to the soccer fans. They're quite adamant to the other end of that. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I was around it all growing up, but with him still being involved, and my brother was a good soccer player and all that, and Sonny's one of my students, so I see him regularly talking about that. And he's got all his youth teams and his whole club going. So I still hear about soccer quite a bit and feel like it's pretty predominant in Tulsa. But yeah, as far as the pro games and all that, I honestly don't know if it's more popular or not, or if it's getting as much limelight as it did.
Why didn't you gravitate towards soccer then?
Dude, I sucked at soccer. Okay, listen. My dad was an amazing player. My mom was a semi-pro soccer player. My brother Patrick went to Hartwick College and Vanderbilt for soccer. and I can barely dribble or shoot the ball. Okay. So pretty early on, I gravitated away from soccer and started wrestling.
Now, as we're kind of winding down this interview, I was wondering if there's anything you'd like to, for people that are listening to this, to kind of leave them with, or something maybe you're doing.
Something I'm doing? Nope. I'm just trying to have the most positive, best day I can every day. Like I preach to my guys all the time that mental health is one of the most important things in life and the key to happiness. No matter what you're doing, anybody can be happy. You've got to wake up every morning and make that choice. You've got to decide that, as they say, feed the good wolf, not the bad wolf. You've got to decide to not think negative thoughts. You've got to decide to do the things you don't want to do that are going to make you better, that are going to pay off in the long run. Be consistent with chores and work ethic and things like that. And surround yourself with people that drive you to be better. And those are honestly what I feel like are the keys to happiness and success and just getting along in this day and age with everything that goes on, all the negativity and all that. It's thrown in your face more than ever. So I feel like so often people see some little blurb on their phone and you can honestly see their attitude change, and they're ruined for something negative they saw or something that was said or anything like that. And you've got to distance yourself from that and just decide that you are going to be happy in your life and make the best of it. And you'll just start to see the blessings flow in.
Did you see The Social Dilemma?
No, I haven't.
You may want to watch that. I think the whole thing kind of surrounds kind of stuff you're talking about, but it kind of shows like the creators of social media and some of the things they did to kind of control people.
I don't want to even know. If I mention something, like my phone sends me an ad for it or anything else.
It's on there. Yeah, it's on there. You would see kind of why that is.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's reading my eyes right now. But we've got a guy in the gym who comes in and every day he's talking about cheesecake. And I swear to God, every day he's in class, I get home and there's a cheesecake ad in my freaking feed somewhere. So yeah, I know it's listening to us.
Yeah, it talks about that. And even some of the creators are talking about how the things they made, they didn't realize could be used in this fashion to kind of negatively impact people, whether it's the like button or, this person signed up now. Yeah, they were kind of using to control, like, this person signed up here. Why don't you say hi to them? Why don't you wave to them?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's something you might find interesting, or maybe you don't want to see it. I don't know.
I try to watch as little TV as possible. I got to be honest. Like I go the other way. I really do feel like, for me anyway, I don't like how looking at it makes me feel. I would delete Facebook if it weren't for the gym page, and I try and stay off as much as possible. One of my favorite things is when I can get away out somewhere where there's no signal and that phone doesn't work. Like those are honestly the best weekends. So yeah, I feel like there is a lot of that in our lives today, and they are so crucial for business and networking and all that. You've just got to, like anything else, it's the yin and the yang. You got to weigh the good and the bad, and you got to kind of sacrifice there too and steer yourself away from things are negative for your mental health.
I mean, I was always like a big documentary watcher, and I think part of the reason I do this podcast is to learn from different people about because I talk to all kinds of people.
So, I know, that's the best part about it, isn't it? Yeah. The best part about it is you get all these different perspectives, and I really like, I don't know, just getting to know people deeper. Like some of these guys I was acquaintances with forever, and I knew about them, you know what I mean? But to get to sit and talk with them, it gives it a whole new perspective. So what are your plans for the podcast? Is this just something you're going to continue to do as fun, or is it something that you would maybe want to grow at some point? It's only ever been fun, and it's one of those things that if somebody says they want to come on, we're like, great, come on, let's go. I'm having Blake Hayes back on tomorrow to come and talk to us. But yeah, it's just, and if I have somebody I want to get on, there's a couple guys around town that I want to get on and a couple I want to come back. But yeah, we just do it as fun. And when our schedule permits, I'm always here. But when Clinton can get in, and because like I said, he's really the brains behind it. He's the one that does all the technical stuff and all the putting it together and putting it out there. I just get to sit there and have a conversation. Now, if someone's listening to this and wanted to find you as far as, your gym or maybe follow what you're doing, if you want to put that out there. Yeah, just Google Ryan BJJ, or you can go to our Facebook page, Ryan Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. and send me a message. Check us out. Come by the gym. Any of those.
All right. Well, Todd, again, I want to thank you for taking time to do this, and hopefully we can catch up again sometime.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.